Support comes from Mechanics Bank, a West Coast bank providing premium personal and business banking services for 120 years. They understand relationships matter and go the extra mile to help clients reach their financial goals. Stop by a branch or visit mechanicsbank.com today. Mechanics Bank, member FDIC.
I'm a firm believer that nature is healing. In these chaotic times, I invite you to take a breath and reconnect with our natural world.
Wow, right in front of us.
I'm Chris Morgan. Join me on The Wild as we explore stories of hope and resilience in nature. We'll bring you up close to some extraordinary species and learn how they are finding ways to adapt and thrive in fast-changing environments. Listen to The Wild on the KUOW app or wherever you get your podcasts.
Hey, Booming listeners. Happy Thanksgiving. The Booming team is taking this week off, but we have a special bonus episode for you. We recorded a live event a few weeks ago at the Seattle Public Library about the future of Seattle's highways, so I wanted to drop it in the feed in case you missed it. I co-hosted the event with Ian Cayce. He's a reporter from WGBH in Boston, and he made this great podcast called The Big Dig. It's about the story of one of Boston's biggest and most controversial infrastructure projects to bury a downtown highway, and the lessons that it offers for today. For a long time, Boston's Big Dig was just known as a boondoggle, a project that cost way more than anyone expected. But today, a lot of people see it as a major success. It's this transformative move that added green space to downtown and healed a divided city. You know, every American city bears the legacy of highways that have divided communities. And every city is grappling with what to do about them now, especially here in Seattle. So Ian and I dug into two major projects in Seattle, one from the past and one that's very much live and ongoing, to look at how big decisions are made about our public infrastructure and what it means for the communities they serve. The two projects are located on different parts of the same highway, State Route 99. So for this event, we had three guests join us. There was former mayor of Seattle, Greg Nichols, who took us way back in time to remember the teardown of the Alaskan Way Viaduct that was finally completed in 2019, but is still transforming the city. And then later, we heard from Cayce James and José Manuel Vásquez, who are both involved in the more recent effort to redesign Highway 99, where it goes through Seattle's South Park neighborhood. Cayce is a strategic advisor for the city of Seattle, and Jose is an activist who lives in South Park. From time to time, you'll hear me ask some questions, including some that listeners sent up to the stage on note cards. Okay, here's the event. I hope you enjoy it. We'll have a regular episode of Booming out next week.
Support comes from Mechanics Bank, a West Coast bank providing premium personal and business banking services for 120 years. They understand relationships matter and go the extra mile to help clients reach their financial goals. Stop by a branch or visit mechanicsbank.com today. Mechanics Bank, member FDIC.
On the latest Sound Politics, the election of a Democratic socialist as mayor of Seattle has made national headlines.
But the story we haven't heard is how she won the moment Katie Wilson decided to enter the race against an incumbent who had racked up every endorsement in the book, and how progressives plan to build an enduring coalition in a city with a famously fickle electorate.
We take a look behind the scenes of Katie Wilson's campaign with the people who ran it on the latest Sound Politics, wherever you get your podcasts.
So there's a line that I heard a number of times about the Big Dig when I was studying it, that there's really two things you need to get right when you're doing a big project. First, you have to do the right project, and then you have to do the project right. And I think there's a tendency to focus on the doing the project right, because that's what the public sees. You know, they see the barriers and they see the cost overruns. And there's a tendency to focus on execution and forget about the decision making, doing the right project. The reason I want to talk with you Greg, is that you were the mayor of Seattle from 2002 to 2010, which were the critical decision-making years. You were not there when the project was fully built out, but you were there at the fork.
Here.
And you're still here. Okay.
Get that on?
I think so. Yeah.
You were there then, and you are here now. And so I wanted to take it back to 2001,
Okay.
the day of the earthquake.
February 28th, 11 o'clock a.m.
Thank you. It sets a lot of this story in motion. Where were you? What happened that day?
Well, I was on the 43rd floor of the Columbia Tower. I was running for mayor, and so I was dialing for dollars. And it was interesting. It was a law office, and as the building basically jumped, all the lawyers went to the windows. And I'm thinking, boy, is that stupid. Should I tell them? I did. So I then, the county courthouse was a couple blocks away, and I kind of thought, I wonder, that's a very old, not very earthquake resistant building. Is my staff okay? Are the people in that? So I went over there. But not until I looked to the southeast, where my daughter was attending Franklin High School, to make sure there weren't, smoke clouds coming up. The only ones I saw were near the Kingdom. There was a collapse of a building near there. So that's where I was, and that day I felt like there was a huge opportunity that was created for the city of Seattle.
And why is that?
Because it's obvious to me, it wasn't obvious to everyone, that the waterfront was a huge asset for the city of Seattle. Our connection to Elliott Bay and across the Salish Sea to the Olympic Mountains is spectacular. And we had walled it off in 1954. And this was an opportunity to take down what was already a expiration date highway and replace it in some way, but open up the city to the water.
Did you know that immediately? Did you,
Yes,
on the day of the
absolutely.
earthquake?
I knew it the day before, but I didn't have the opportunity politically to be able to accomplish that. That would have been a much
So as you're backing away from the windows, you're thinking...
didn't go to the windows. That was the...
So just to set the scene,
Yeah.
the road we're talking about is the Alaskan Way Viaduct.
Yes.
Right, it's a double-decker elevated highway right on the waterfront. What kind of shape was the road in after the earthquake?
Well, it got a new name. We never referred to it as anything but the dangerous Alaskan Way Viaduct because it was sinking. There was a curve toward the south end, and that area in particular was sinking, and we closed it every 6 months to measure just how much. And we came very close to posting it against heavy loads, against trucks being able to use the facility. And eventually we did post it so that the heavy loads had to be in the far right lane, either direction.
Wow.
So its days were numbered, and the question was whether we would take advantage of that with opening the city up, or if we would go the cheap route, quote unquote, and put up another double-deck highway. It was an easy question for me.
The viaduct at that point, though it wasn't a wall that separated downtown from the waterfront, it acted like a wall.
Yes, yeah.
It was loud. You had to sort of walk underneath this shadowy parking area. It didn't feel good, and I think it created a sense that the waterfront was somehow something you had to travel through this barrier to.
Yeah.
Oh, that's exactly right, yeah. And I think people who are enjoying it now, it kind of dawns on, oh, this is okay.
By the way, I got in this afternoon and I took a walk along the waterfront, so nicely done. So at that point, you're elected mayor the same year, later in 2001.
Yes.
And what are the options that you're facing at that point?
Well, it's a state highway, and so the funding for it comes through the state, much of it federal, but also a fair amount from the state. And Doug McDonald, who was Secretary of Transportation, either right then or shortly thereafter, was an important player, and he had been in Boston during much of the Big Dig. So he had very strong thoughts about that. He was with the Harbor Authority, I think.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, he supervised the cleanup of that, right? $3.8 billion, something like that.
And so we needed to have support at the state level. And we had a good friend who was chair of the State Transportation Committee at the House, Ed Murray, who later became mayor. And he and my administration worked very closely to put together a funding package, not just for replacement of the viaduct, but also for 520 and many other needs across the state. But in the middle of the 2000s, he went to the Senate and was no longer our champion in the House. And in fact, there were folks who were very much against this idea. And both the House and the Senate were supporting the idea of a replacement viaduct, which would have been wider because new standards are in place for how wide lanes are.
Breakdown lanes,
and
merging lanes.
That's exactly right. It would have been huge compared with what was already an incredible barrier. So we decided that we were going to have to put on a campaign, literally a campaign to convince the legislature that that was not a viable option, that they did not want to go there. And I sent you a video that we did that talked about the Committee to Save Big Ugly Things.
Yeah, tell me about the Committee to Save Big Ugly Things.
Well, I have to admit it didn't really exist. But the video was pretty effective in letting people kind of understand that in addition to the cost, there was a question of value.
So for context, just for, if you haven't seen it, it's like a spoof campaign ad by this fictitious group called the Committee to Save Big Ugly Things, which is attacking you for wanting to tear down the viaduct.
Yes.
Is that right? Okay.
Yes.
Who did you get to play the like spokesperson of Big Ugly Things?
A local actor and comedian from, from Capitol Hill. He was in Sleepless in Seattle. He was the mailman. And he was the narrator, if you will.
Yep. And sorry, I have one other detail question. In the video, it gives some other examples of Big Ugly Things.
Yes.
But I didn't get the local references.
They were local, the Blob at the foot of Queen Anne Hill.
What was that thing, anyway?
It was a dry cleaner, I think, originally, and maybe a restaurant at some point.
Until it was torn down?
It was torn down, yeah, unless it was burned down. I'm
Travesty.
Not sure. Yeah.
And then
the one at the end, the Kingdom was another one.
That was the old baseball stadium?
Yes, yeah, multi-purpose stadium, if you will.
Another loss of our architectural heritage.
And
right up there with Penn Station.
The tagline on the video was, and if Mayor Nichols gets his way, you know what's next. And it was a picture of the Experience Music Project. And this archives have this, so if you go to YouTube and
sorry, you're going to have to explain that one to me.
The Seattle Center has a very interesting building.
It's a Frank Gehry
It's
building.
a Frank Gehry, but we didn't get the best Frank Gehry. I think we got maybe his recreation time or something, yeah, because it's an odd, very odd-looking building. The top is supposed to be a broken guitar because the sponsor, the patron of it, Paul Allen, was a big fan of Jimi Hendrix, and Jimmy from time to time would smash a guitar. Wow. So the building kind of has that feel and look.
Got it. So that's the pantheon of big, ugly Seattle things amidst which the viaduct sat.
Yes. I mean, we were tongue-in-cheek. We wanted to use humor in what was otherwise a very serious debate.
Yeah. Sorry, I realize I totally derailed us on that. But and so you're appealing to the governor at that point?
No, we were appealing to the public.
Yeah.
and trying to get people to understand this opportunity that we had so that they in turn would let their legislators know, would let the governor know that there was public support for this crazy idea.
And just how serious was the state government about rebuilding the viaduct, bigger and better than ever?
Very serious. I was invited to a meeting in the governor's conference room where it was the governor, the Speaker of the House, the Majority Leader of the State Senate, the Chair of the State House, and the Chair of the State Senate Transportation Committees, and me. And they basically said, we're going to do a new viaduct. And I said, over my dead body, effectively. And they said, okay.
Terms accepted.
But then I want to give them some credit. As we began to show that public support out there, they began to change their minds. And when they thought that this new technology of a deep bore tunnel, I had been advocating for a more conventional tunnel along the waterfront and under, they and we came to an agreement in about 2009, and they stuck with it. Even though it was difficult when Bertha got stuck, they stuck with it, and I give them credit for that. In politics, you need to find common ground, and we were able to find that common ground, and I think the public has benefited greatly as a result.
Yeah.
You know, at the time, there were people talking about different solutions, including just not putting a tunnel underground.
Yep.
And in fact, voters voted against a tunnel.
And against the elevated.
And against the elevated
yeah.
solution. So, and some people wanted to have just, basically a surface road.
Sure.
So sometimes I wonder, why did you push against what seemed like the will of the voters at that time?
Well, the will of the voters was to not do those two particular projects. I don't think it was to do nothing.
Yeah.
I think what they effectively did, and that was a very strange election, and I take responsibility for that.
Yeah, can you explain how the ballot question was worded? What the
it
question
was? You want A? Do you want B? Do you want neither?
A was replace the viaduct as is.
Not as is, but replace it.
Replace
yeah.
it. B was a tunnel.
Yes, and C was. And what it did, though, was it cleared the deck so that we could start over as policymakers in trying to find a common ground and a solution. So my goal in that election was to kill the elevated, to make it absolutely a dead end. It also killed the preferred alternative I had, which was the more conventional tunnel, but that was okay. We figured out we would find a way. We studied the idea of surface streets, and we could not figure out a way to make it work. We tried, and my transportation director favored the idea of not having a new tunnel. So we tried, but we could not figure out how to do it without basically gridlocking the entire regional network.
Would the Washington State Department of Transportation ever have gone along with an option that didn't, commit a number of lanes and some amount of throughput through that area, through that corridor?
Their strong inclination was to have capacity, yes. And it would have been on us to show that we could provide that capacity without a highway, without a tunnel. And we weren't able, we tried, but we couldn't do that.
Do you recall what the final vote numbers were on the two options?
Oh, both lost. And that's all I cared about, was that the one elevated lost, but I don't remember the numbers now.
Yeah.
I won my election by 3,278 votes.
But who's counting? So, at that point, I understand there was a campaign against both. That was sort of like the no and hell no campaign. After the results of the election, did you take that to heart, that the voters, as Joshua was saying, wanted no highway at all through their city or through that part of the city. You said that you felt like that wasn't workable. What did it come down to in the end? Why did it feel unworkable to you?
Because anyone who attempts to use Interstate 5 understands that we have a very narrow city. It's kind of wasp-shaped. And the capacity to be able to get north and south to places like Everett and Tacoma or the nearby suburbs to the north and south is really restricted. I-5 is not going to expand. It should be lidded. I've seen some folks with lidding as they rebuild it. But we need to have some capacity, particularly as one or another of the corridors is out of action for some reason. You need to have some alternative, and that's what that tunnel provides today.
Yeah. I know one thing that has sort of changed over time has been how traffic engineers and city planners think about mobility. Mm-hmm. And today, in the 1950s, 1960s, there was this idea that the highways that would kind of ring around downtown and get office workers to the outskirts of the city or even to the suburbs. You had Northgate, the mall, was built out there in the, I think, 1950s. And the freeway had, I think, opened in the 1960s. So there's this idea of getting people sort of out of the city. And the highways, in some ways, were a legacy of that. But then over time, starting in, the 1990s or 2000s, people started thinking about, moving people in other means. Sure. One of the things that was looked at on the waterfront was a surface plus transit option, where you would look at transit to carry more of that load. How much was that thinking influential at all to you? And what
sure.
could be?
I'm one of the founders of Sound Transit. I helped create that agency and took it to the voters in 1996 and 2008 to get approval for the first phase and the phase that's being built right now. But from the day I got elected to the county council to the day the first stations opened was 22 years. It takes a huge amount of time to build that kind of mass transit system in an already built urban environment. The T, fortunately, was built in the late 1800s and, looks it.
For better or for worse, yeah.
But it was already there and development occurred around it. That's not what happens here, is the development's already here and we got to figure out how we squeeze it in. And my neighborhood of West Seattle, we had hoped to have light rail by 2030. Now it looks like closer to 2040. And so we are going to have to balance how we create that system and how we provide mobility as it's being built.
Could you talk about, when all these options are on the table and being weighed, what are the constituencies that are really pushing to rebuild, to maintain the highway capacity? Are there business groups, labor groups, political factions? Like, what is the pressure that's coming to bear to say, oh, we need this road?
So I think it comes from a wide variety of sources. Certainly the business community, as they try and move goods and services, labor, as they try and make sure that jobs are accessible and being created in the region. But the average person who doesn't want to get ulcers because they're in this horrible, unending traffic without alternatives, there's a strong constituency amongst the general public as well.
Yeah. So you mentioned that in 2009, you reached this agreement with the state.
Yes.
That it was going to be a tunnel, it was going to be a deep bore tunnel, and you finally kind of reached the end of this long, torturous decision-making journey. Mm-hmm. And then later that same year, you're up for re-election. What happens?
Well, I had the misfortune of feeling like I'd like a third term as mayor. I knew Tom Menino, he's a friend of mine, and he'd served for 20 years and seemed to be going okay. But in Seattle, there isn't a strong tradition of third terms for mayors. There's one exception to that. And he ran for a third term because his first term was so bad. And he told me that.
Who are you talking about?
I'm talking about Charlie Royer, who at the end of the day was a great mayor, but who started real slowly. So I ran. We were in the midst of the Great Recession. The credit system had collapsed. People's mortgages were underwater. Their 401ks were losing value, and they were pissed.
Yeah.
And the best way to take that out was on executives.
Yeah. Did you feel like the Alaskan Way project was
I don't
a part
think
of
the
it?
Alaskan Way project was part of it. I think there was this little snowstorm that we had. We get one about every 20 years, and we didn't perform real well on that.
History turns on a knife point.
So, but I think it was just mostly people were feeling under stress and angry, and it was a convenient way to express that.
Got a relevant question here.
Please.
You've talked about building support.
Yes.
In the Big Dig podcast, you talk a lot, Ian, about winning hearts and minds. And so, from your perspective, I'm wondering, did the Alaska Way Viaduct win hearts and minds? When did it win hearts and minds during its project phases? And what are some key principles and tactics for winning hearts and minds early on and keeping them through a long, expensive, and complex project? I guess that's a question that either one of you could answer, Ian or Greg Nichols, or both.
Yeah, we convinced a fair number of people that the idea of building a new elevated highway was atrocious. I'm not sure how many we convinced that the tunnel was the right alternative. There was, I think, a split between people who would rather have tried to make the surface system work. But imagine how much wider Alaskan Way Surface Street would be if we had done that, and other arterials through the center of the city. But we convinced enough legislators that they stepped up and funded it. And today, I think the day that we cut the ribbon for the waterfront park, I think we won about every heart and every mind.
Another question we got is about LID I-5. They say transformative projects succeed when they become part of the public's imagination, when people see their hopes and values reflected. The waterfront achieved this shared ownership. As Seattle explores lidding I-5, what can be done early to make sure people across the city and not just downtown see themselves in the project and feel part of its success? I think this could apply to many different projects besides
sure.
LID I-5.
Trying to transform a city is a difficult task. Building a mass transit system is a difficult task. Taking down a viaduct and replacing it and opening up the city to the water is a big idea. I'm not sure, having lived through those two, that you really do capture the public's full imagination. I think you have to be persistent and move forward, and as it's uncovered, people then start to get the idea. But they don't right away. We had a lot of opposition to light rail initially, and we went ahead and we did the first phase, and people said, "Oh, okay, that's okay." And the waterfront, very similar. I have more people come up to me and say, "I thought you were crazy when you were fighting this fight, but maybe you were right." Sometimes it takes leadership and putting your neck a little bit on the line, and then the public will follow.
So how do you know, as a elected official and a leader, when to follow the public and try to listen to the public's will, and when to try and guide the public?
That's a great question, and I think for 2 terms I was successful at that, and going for a third I was less successful. So the public will let you know if they think you've gotten too far in front, but the public also will forgive you if they disagree with you, but they think you're trying to act in the best common interest. And then when it's a reality, they'll let you know if they think it was the right thing or not. But the I-5 is at the end of its useful life, as the viaduct was. Mm-hmm. We haven't had a recent earthquake, and I hope we don't, anytime in the next 15, 20 years. But it's clear that that wound that was torn through the heart of our city 60 years ago needs to be re-knitted back together. And the idea of a lid over major portions of it and finding ways to heal that wound, I think is one of the next big things.
We're going to take a quick break. When we come back, we'll look at a future project that could change the way we think about highways in the city of Seattle. A major redesign of Highway 99 in a different section of the city. That's coming up.
So if you drive south through that tunnel we've been talking about on State Road 99, you then pass, as you get towards the end of the city, you pass through this neighborhood that I had never heard of before a few weeks or months ago called
South Park.
South Park.
Yeah.
And it's interesting. It's the same exact road, right? It's State Road 99, but it's a very different part of the city. We're no longer in downtown. This is a residential area. And South Park today is facing the same basic question that the waterfront was facing 25 years ago of what do we do with this highway?
Yep.
And to talk about that question, we've got two guests with us. Cayce James is a strategic advisor with the City of Seattle, working on the South Park project. And José Manuel Vásquez is a member of the group Reconnect South Park. Give them a warm welcome.
Hello.
Welcome. Thanks for joining us.
Thanks for having us.
So, José, you grew up in South Park. Can you give us a little sense of the neighborhood, a little portrait of the place where you grew up, and specifically what this highway was like in the neighborhood?
Yeah, happy to. Yeah, South Park has been the home to me and my family since the 80s when my uncles first arrived here. And yeah, it's, if you're not familiar with South Park, we're one of the southernest most neighborhoods in Seattle. Over the decades has been the highest Latino population, so it is the Latino barrio. It's where my family found a home when we arrived in the early 90s. My family started a business there. That's where we were able to thrive as a family. But if you're not familiar geographically, we're across the river, the Duwamish River, which is kind of the ancestral home of the Duwamish tribe here in the Pacific Northwest, across Boeing Airfield. So we're across the airport, across the river. We're surrounded by, 509 on the west side. On the east side, East Marginal Way, and then surrounded by a lot of industrial zoning and a dump. The South Transfer Station, we're a dump adjacent neighborhood. There's a lot of environmental issues that we face in the community. We're one of the only neighborhoods, I think, in all Washington, besides, I can remember of two others, Superfund sites. I don't know if anybody's familiar with the Superfund site, but it's one of the most contaminated areas in the country.
Wow.
I grew up right next door to T117, the Superfund site. We've had the most kids per capita, the least amount of green spaces for our community, historically low income, but at the same time, it's a neighborhood that I'm very proud of because it's been my home. We have a lot of rich cultural traditions, celebrations, from Fiestas Patrias to the posadas we hold every year. At once it was half of the businesses on the main corridor were either Latino-owned or primarily Latino serving. Now, because of gentrification throughout the years and displacement, we've seen that percentage drop a bit, but it's still the home of our immigrant community. So it's a neighborhood that I'm very proud of, and it's why I'm so deeply involved here in the Reconnect South Park campaign.
What is the highway like going through South Park? What is the neighborhood's relation to the highway of State Route 99?
Yes, yeah, thanks for reminding me about that. Yeah, the highway literally cuts the neighborhood in two. It cuts right in the middle of the neighborhood. We have Concord Elementary, which is the only elementary school in the neighborhood, right next to the highway. And kids literally have to go through a path called the Scary Trail. I mean, government has been recognizing this little path as the Scary Trail since I was a kid.
Like you can find government documents that refer to, quote, the Scary Trail.
I've written a few of those. So.
Okay.
So to me, that's just a non-starter. The fact that kids have to take a path called the Scary Trail to get to their elementary school.
And the Scary Trail goes along the edge of State Road 99?
Yeah, Jason, I believe on 8th, at the end of 8th, on this side, where the library is, it starts, and it's just a really unkept, a lot of overgrown bushes and trees. And on the other side is the highway, trucks going down super fast. And then you have to go over a little crosswalk bridge over the highway and hear all the trucks going underneath you. And then a block and you're at the elementary school.
And that was your walk to school at one point?
Unfortunately, in the 90s, I was part of the busing system, so I was bussed out of the neighborhood, which I was so angry because I didn't get to go to Concord.
Oh, wow.
But I have a lot of friends that did go and a lot of family that did go there. To this day, he still goes there.
Wow. When you were young, did it ever cross your mind that that highway could be removed entirely? Is that something you could imagine?
Honestly, no, because to me, relatively speaking, I come from Mexico City, which is a concrete jungle, if you're familiar. So to me, coming from that concrete jungle to South Park was a fresh breath of air. A breath of fresh air, sorry. Because I remember the first night, we arrived on a Friday night. The very next morning, my dad was like, "Mijo, let's go for a walk." So we go out, we walk outside, and I see these huge trees and homes. Those two, in my mind, as a 7-year-old, that math didn't check out. Because I was used to either concrete or you're out in the country, and that's where you see nature. But having those two so close to each other, it blew my mind. And South Park, if you're not familiar, we have some of the most beautiful, but I think also rarest trees in all of Seattle. It's beautiful if you get to drive by through this time of the year, fall colors. It's amazing. So to me, that was already a step up, I would say. So a highway wasn't a big deal, and then the airport, then the dump, and then another highway, and then surrounded by industrial. So to me, that was normal.
Wow. It was like your little oasis surrounded by highways and Superfund sites?
It really is. South Park is such a beautiful community. I mean, it's such a close-knit community. Everybody is so supportive of each other. We all look out for each other, even though we're facing with all these environmental, economic, social impacts around us. So it's really the community that made me who I am today, and it's why I've been so involved to be an advocate for my community and to be part of this work along with other community leaders that are here.
Cayce, could you talk about the road itself? Why was it built? How was it built? Why is it there?
Yeah, absolutely. So back in the early 1900s, South Park was a well-connected community. It had a fully developed neighborhood street grid. It was linked to downtown with a streetcar. It was home to a lot of immigrant farmers at that time, and a lot of the produce that was sold in Seattle's famous Pike Place Market was coming from South Park back then.
Because there was actual farmland around there.
There was sort of like a connected neighborhood. They had their own mayor, and then there was farmland sort of surrounding it.
Got it.
Back in the 1930s, South Park was redlined. And then after that, industry started moving into the Duwamish Valley. And the city actually, in the 50s and 60s, there was a plan to remove the South Park and neighboring Georgetown communities entirely. And we were just going to replace the entire Duwamish Valley with industrial land use.
Wow.
And SR 99 was planned through South Park during that time. But the neighborhood fought back, and they were successful. They were able to stop the industrial rezoning of the neighborhood, but they weren't able to stop the highway.
the highway planners were operating under the assumption that there was no neighborhood.
It was basically a dual plan to, just displace the community and replace it with industrial.
Yeah.
It wasn't the original plan that before I-5, it was going to be the highway to connect north and south.
Yeah, so it was originally planned as a federal highway.
But it ended up being a state road. It didn't get the interstate designation because there was another road.
Yeah. So let me get to the I-5 section in a bit, but let's start with when 99 actually first came in, right? So when the highway came to South Park, I can't really imagine, honestly, a more destructive way that a highway could be built through a community. So it went at a diagonal to the neighborhood street grid, and it's a limited access highway, so that means there's no intersections, and also it's built at grade, so it's not elevated or sunken. So that meant, through this neighborhood, it created 22 dead-end streets, 22 dead ends out of previously connected streets.
In a pretty small area.
Yeah. So in this sort of 3 miles that we're looking at, there's that, and then it only really left 2 crossing points in that entire section that you can get across on foot, and pretty much nothing that anyone would want to bike across. So it really disrupted the neighborhood, cut people off from their neighbors and from parks and schools and so forth, and those impacts still really impact the community today. But let's talk about I-5. So,
no, but I feel like you hear this story in every city of like the highway came in and they rammed it through the neighborhood and they severed, and that is true. That did happen in virtually every city that I know of. But really looking at this thing on a map, it is really bad. Just the amount of connections that were cut off and the very few connections that do remain across that highway. Like you said, even among all urban highway projects in this country, it really does stand out.
Yeah, I mean, when you put all those things together, you can't really, because there's the river on one side, and then there's a bigger highway, 509, on the other side of the neighborhood. So you can't go a half mile in really any direction within South Park without getting cut off by something. So it's basically as disruptive as possible to the neighborhood and to connectivity. But we were talking about I-5, and I was just going to say that after I-5 was built, that became the new highway. So it was really just a few years that 99 served its intended purpose as this federal highway. So just shortly after traffic moved over to the modern highway, 99 became obsolete and was decommissioned. So at that point, it became a state route. And since then, a lot of the other segments to the north and south have been further downsized. So just south of South Park is the city of Tukwila, and Tukwila, the Tukwila segment of 99 became Tukwila International Boulevard in the early 2000s. So it was put under local jurisdiction so they could plant more street trees and integrate it into their community. So actually, other than the tunnel, most segments of of 99 to the north and south of this one look more like city streets. They have intersections, they're much narrower and so forth, and actually most of them carry more traffic. So, this is, in some ways, you can kind of imagine this segment as really an overbuilt remnant of a former highway system. It's not really carrying the traffic that it was originally built to carry, but it's still carrying all of the harm on the community.
Right. How busy is it? Like if you go walk along the Scary Trail, is it kind of sparsely used, the highway itself?
So it carries traffic that's pretty similar to like a busy city street, not similar to most other highways.
But it's like a divided, limited access highway.
Exactly, yeah.
So when you're approaching a road like this in your role at the city, what's the menu of options on the table for this project?
Yeah, so when we first started, when we started thinking about this work, we were able to think of several different possibilities. So one thing would be removing the highway entirely. We looked at converting it into a boulevard. We considered putting it underground, making a tunnel, and doing more mitigation, so sound walls and so forth. And the first thing that we did with our technical studies was to do a feasibility screening. And so we looked at just basic sort of environmental and engineering considerations, and through that we figured out that a tunnel option wasn't really feasible to continue studying. There's just a lot of different concerns and risks between soil contamination, underground utility conflicts, and so forth. So the other three were all considered feasible, and those are the ones that we're continuing to study. So we've got two different boulevard options, a wider boulevard, a narrower boulevard that we're looking at, a removal concept, and what we're calling bridges and trails, which is more about mitigation.
So it's boulevard, full removal, and mitigation.
Yeah.
I get the sense with projects like this, there is this phase early on where it's like every idea is a good idea, everything's on the table, we can all sort of like dream, and then things get serious at some point. The real money is on the table, specialized interests are involved, and the options start to narrow. And I'm wondering what's your sense of the project at this moment? Like, do you feel like the fully remove the road and don't replace it is like a viable option on the table?
Yeah, I mean, I don't think we're quite to a point of taking anything else off the table right now. We're bringing all these options forward for further study, but I do think that removal is definitely a credible option to keep considering. And we've been hearing a lot of positive feedback around this option from the community, and it makes sense why. It would have in our studies we found the greatest number of benefits and also the greatest magnitude of benefits for that option. We'd be looking at freeing up 100 acres of new land for housing and parks and new businesses. It would greatly reduce traffic pollution in South Park and also throughout the whole region. So we're seeing a lot of benefits that people are feeling really excited about with that possibility.
Hearing this description and comparing it to, the way you, Mayor Nichols, were talking about the viaduct removal, I'm just thinking about how the sense of possibility has changed. Do you see the viaduct removal as in any way sort of informing the realm of possibility? I'm also thinking about how you talked about you still you couldn't figure out how to get traffic through without maintaining that tunnel. And here in the case of South Park, you're talking about removing it. So what has changed, or what has allowed this to change?
Yeah, I would say that there's a few things that are a little bit different about this road that kind of change the circumstances here. So when we're talking about traffic, that's certainly a concern that people think about with the removal option, but the impacts are actually maybe a lot less than one might imagine, and there's a lot of different reasons for that. One important reason is that there's 4 other north-south highways and arterials that run parallel to this route within just a mile. So there's a lot of other options that drivers have today for other ways to get around. And
just say that one more time. 4 arterial highways.
Yeah, arterials and highways.
Moving in the same direction.
Parallel.
Within a mile.
That's it, yeah.
Okay. Making sure I got that.
So yeah, people have lots of different ways to get around this corridor. And what we found is that pretty much anywhere you're coming from or going to, one of those options is just as fast or faster than taking 99 today. So when we're studying the impacts of removing it, what we're seeing is a pretty even distribution across these other routes. So basically what that means is, we've talked about the levels of traffic being more like a big city street that are on this highway. So when you have all of that funneling right through this regional traffic, 90% of the traffic on 99 is regional traffic. It's not coming or going to South Park, right? So when you have all that regional traffic funneling right through the heart of the neighborhood, right next to the school and so forth, that has huge impacts on that community. But then when you take that same level of traffic and you spread it out through these regional networks, what we're expecting is about a 3.5% increase overall in traffic on these other routes. So it's a much smaller change than what we're seeing in terms of South Park's impacts.
And what I could add is also knowing, not just looking at it through the lens of transportation, but looking at it holistically from the community impacts. South Park deserves the right solution. We deserve the best solution. We don't know what that is yet. No decision has been made yet, but we have 3.5 possible alternatives. And part of that community engagement, we did some outreach to local small businesses. And I remember a conversation we had with a local Uber driver, a gig economy driver, who uses that route regularly to get from Georgetown, from Seattle to I-5. It's literally a shortcut to I-5. And when we were having this conversation, he told me, like, yes, this highway is important to me. It's my livelihood. It's the route that gets me the fastest to my destination. We're like, great, let me capture that. Let me get that feedback. And then we started talking about the impacts, the kids having to go through the scary trail, the environmental impacts. Once we started in that conversation, he took a step back and he said, you know what? An extra 15 minutes isn't that bad if it means a kid has a safe way to get to his school. So I just wanted to bring that kind of that larger context besides just the transportation needs. It's more of the community deserves a holistic approach to this, and we don't know what that is yet, but that's kind of the conversations that we're having right now with the community.
Yeah. Do you feel like, does your community trust the city of Seattle to get this right? Because removing a highway, turning it into a boulevard, redeveloping land, restoring the street grid, this is a big change we're talking about. Do you run into that kind of skepticism in the community too, of like whether the city will actually pull this off right?
I mean, right now is not a really good time to ask my community if we trust government. And historically, we have been neglected, forgotten about, let down by government. So that is still there. That chip is still there.
Yeah.
There is hope, and there is, energy, and there's excitement about envisioning what could be. And that's where I think but we are fortunate that in local government, we do have strong partners. We do have strong internal, I think we've mentioned the inside-outside strategy. We got to make sure that the organizing that we're doing outside, we're also doing inside government, making sure that the right people are plugged in and know about this work well ahead of any decision happening or any campaign happening. But it's more about a collective effort, like how as we, and we're learning this process as we're going too. We're not experts in a campaign to remove a highway, but we're learning. So I do see hope, even though there is that chip in the shoulder, I think.
Here's a question that Cayce could answer. How will the more restrictive environment for federal dollars affect Seattle's ability to pursue these options, for example, in South Park?
Well, right now we actually are getting federal funding to support this project. So we have federal funding and state funding and commitment from the city as well. And that's a huge part of what's getting us through these early planning stages. Yeah, I think, we're not quite sure what's going to be possible in the coming years, but I would say that there are a lot of different partnerships. The state's already involved, and I could see, philanthropy being part of this project. So I can't really say what's going to happen with any particular partner right now, but I think there's a lot of possibilities for collaboration with this work.
And where does the project stand at this moment? What is the status, and what is the next big thing you're looking towards?
Yeah, so right now we're finishing up what we're calling this potential futures analysis. So looking at these different options that we've been talking about and studying those based on community-defined goals. So we're looking at a broad set of metrics from health to environment, climate, business support, affordable housing, and so forth, and seeing what we just measuring how we expect each of these different options would fare. And from that, we'll be going into a community vision planning process. So we'll be so there's a lot of folks from the coalition here today. So they're already out working with the community, trying to share that information that we found in our studies, and working with residents from different communities, from working with industrial partners and freight operators and so forth, trying to talk about what we're seeing and figure out what benefits and trade-offs people are most excited to see. So from that, we'll be developing a community-selected expected future that we'll put forward in this vision plan, and really try to bring it to life with more concrete ideas for what people would like to see in terms of housing and parks and new road connections and trails and so forth.
I think we are at time, but I wanted to close with one last question, which is, we can now go down to the waterfront and see the results of that project that began 25 years ago. For, I think, Jose and Cayce in particular, if you imagine South Park 25 years from now and you walk through that neighborhood, what do you see?
I mean, I think what I could imagine is this area of the neighborhood that's currently, that currently divides folks, that currently creates all these problems, all of a sudden becoming this new spine of community life. Kids biking to school, you could see families picnicking where there used to be, overpasses, right? You could see, birds flying overhead and so forth, and new businesses opening up. And I think it would be amazing to basically have this piece of infrastructure that came in as this generational act of transformation, that paved over so many acres of fertile river valley and divided this community. This generational mistake become a generational act of hope and repair.
Yeah, and definitely if we were able to, get rid of the highway, reclaim that land for community needs and priorities, the Cloverleaf, which is at the southernmost end, that could become a beautiful park. That's something we need more in South Park, more green spaces for community to enjoy. And then from there, I imagine two main commercial corridors that could become kind of like wrapping the residential center, whereas the hub for community, making sure we have accessible jobs. There's a need for more childcare providers in the community. There's so many needs that I think this community, and it's going through so many changes. So that question is hard for me right now because I can't even imagine what South Park is going to look like tomorrow. Every year we see new homes getting torn down and new townhomes popping up, which is the natural growth, of any major city. It's nothing rare, but how can we make sure that change, that future change, is driven by the communities that have made that place what it is today? That's what I'm really passionate about. How do we make sure that the communities that have been displaced and already priced out are able to come back, afford to come back and buy future homes, or afford to come back and start businesses back in the community? That's what I'm really excited for. And I know this project I'm probably not going to see the benefits in my lifetime. Maybe so, who knows? But we're definitely excited and definitely being intentional about including the youth in our community, because they're the ones that are really going to help shape this project and see the true benefits of what comes out of this. So who knows? I think it's right now just a huge opportunity for us. If it is possible, we don't even know if it's possible yet, but if so, then once I think we get more of those solid ideas in place, I think that's where maybe in my mind I can have a better vision for that. But for now, it's no highway for me, personally.
Thank you all so much.
Thank you.
That's it for Booming. Thanks so much for listening. Special thanks to Charlotte Duran, Hans Twite, and the rest of the KUOW event team for helping make the live event happen. If you have a question about the economy that you want us to answer, email us at booming@kuow.org or leave us a voicemail at 206-221-7158. Also, special thanks to those of you who are donating to the show. We couldn't do it without you. If you want to donate, go to kuow.org/booming. Our producers are Lucy Suchek and Alec Cowan. Our editor is Carol Smith. I'm Joshua McNichols. Monica and I will see you next week.